Welcome to Peacebuilding Initiatives, where we explore the transformative power of dialogue, cross-cultural understanding, and the collective empathy in building more peaceful and connected communities. I'm your host, José Barzola. Thank you for joining us today. In today's episode, we're honored to speak with Pualani Enos, who has her JD, is the owner of Kaulia Creates, LLC, where she brings together creators and leaders to address complex social challenges in ways that advance social justice and community well-being, all in harmony with Hawaii's rich and diverse ecosystem. Drawing from systems thinking, design processes, impact networks, and social action research, Pualani grounds her work in Indigenous knowledge and practices to support leaders as they navigate change with wisdom and adaptability. She currently served as a mediation apprentice at the West Hawaii Mediation Center in Kona on Hawaii Island. Pualani is also a lecturer at the Matanani Institute for Peace at the University of Hawaii at Manoa. She teaches Ika Kapuna, Indigenous frameworks for peace building. Beyond the classroom, she collaborates with faculty across the country to develop community-based peace building research, scholarship, and educational models aimed at reducing complex conflict rooted in complex trauma. And today, our conversation explores the profound intersections of trauma, healing, and restorative practices, and how Indigenous frameworks can reshape the way communities understand conflict, nurture resilience, and ideally cultivate peace. So, well, thank you so much for being here. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you for that intro. You said a lot in a very little time. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited.
Well, to get us started, we always like to get started on just getting to know like the personal journey for folks. So, you don't mind sharing a bit about your own personal and professional journey and what experiences led you to work at the intersection of Indigenous knowledge, systems thinking, and peace building?
Sure, sure. Um, so one thing that I identify about myself, and I think sometimes because diaspora is such a shameful, stigmatized thing that people have who grew up here will tell me, you don't have to mention that you didn't grow up here because you are here. This is your home. But I think it has a lot to do with why I do the work that I do. I grew up with my mom and my younger sister, and it was just the three of us. My dad also lived in California. My mom met my dad there after he had moved from Maui. And I didn't see him very much. So my mom is Dutch and Lithuanian. And so she's very fair skinned. And we really stood out as little kids being two little brownies. And I say that very affectionately because I'm trying to be more. I love brown skin. I love black skin. I like white skin. Like they're all good. But I assimilated completely. I didn't say my name correctly. My sister didn't. It was just hard. My mom always said it correctly and she encouraged us, but we lived in Southern California. I would say a majority of my friends were blonde hair and blue eyed, and some were brown hair. And, I was writing about this for another thing, and I was very lucky to find very loving white families who would take me in because my mom worked three jobs most of my life. She never, she got her GED as an adult. She didn't finish high school. And because of that, she was great at math and she was the most well-read person I've ever met. But because of not having a degree, she worked a lot. And I had these wonderful people. And, it's really funny now the way we divide people up, and if you're from a location or you look a certain way. And at the same time, it was hard not looking like everyone else, right? So, but I got into this very fancy private school, which saved my life in high school. And I basically I did not want to live in Southern California and work like my mom did. I think that was probably more of it. And back then, girls didn't surf; they weren't allowed to surf. So I went to the East Coast to get my education, and everyone thought that I would stay there. But I was so lucky to meet Heidi Ho. Her mom is Diane Ho, and they're from Maui, and we were both lawyers in Boston. I worked at Northeastern University, which was a fabulous place. And again, all of the people I worked for were white, but they really formed who I was. And that was where I got my social justice, anti-poverty. I'm calling it now liberatory education and liberatory governance because they're words that I recently learned, but basically that everybody matters. And we all have our place and we all have our contributions. But when I met her, she said to me, "You know, you don't say your name correctly, right?" and, and I said, "Yeah, no, I know. But it's just so hard." She's like, "Oh, it's like killing me listening because people were speaking of me I did a lot of teaching. I did a lot of research. I did a lot of presentations. I was a lot of places and people would introduce me so nicely. It's like, but they say your name. It's killing me, you know? And I said, "Yeah, it doesn't bother me." And she just said, it should bother you. Right. And then she introduced me to all of these Hawaiians that were at like MIT and Harvard. So in my mind, Hawaiians were just this brain trust, like these spectacular, smart, able people. And, but I was embarrassed because I didn't know anyone and I didn't know anything about nothing. Right. And so she kept saying, she invited me, and they were talking about the Great Mahele. And what I didn't appreciate at that time, which I do now that I teach Ike Kupunan, some of the history of Hawaii that relates to trauma and historical trauma, is that they're learning for the first time a lot of history that was never shared with people in Hawaii, right? So she said, "This is an important thing. This is a great place. It's so aligned with what you care about." Because I worked in many communities of color with refugees and immigrants and all different kinds. And I couldn't speak their language, but I facilitated a lot of things happening around their culture being lifted and us accommodating them instead of them accommodating us as lawyers and service providers. And she's like, "It's really up your alley." And then she said, "And I'm not taking another case of yours, immigration case, until you come." I was like, "Come on, like that's not right." And she's like, I know that'll make you come." And it did. So I showed up late because that's one of the things I do when I'm really nervous. And I tell you, Jose, I think this is why I love our culture. Um, Even though we were in this old room at MIT, it was part of the graduate program, and there were probably 130 people in that room from Wellesley. I mean, from people, I think Manu Meyer had already left because everyone talked about how wonderful she is. And I finally got to meet her. And I've been with her 28 years later after coming back to Hawaii. But I mean, just like Radcliffe Fellows, people who had written books, like, just fabulously talented people. And so I walk in, imagine like one of those older rooms, big windows, and I'm just trying to sneak into the back. And Kaeo Duarte, he probably doesn't even remember, but he works here now. He said, "Pua, we've been waiting for you." I was like, "What?" And every single person in that room stood up and moved their chairs so that we could all be in a circle. And I was apologizing. People were like, "Stop!" Like they're just kind of like, I mean, that's how unfamiliar. And I would always do that in junior high, in high school, in college, at work. I mean, like everywhere I would do that. I would be like, make room, circle. And that's my mom that taught me that because I wasn't around my dad. And I was like, "Oh, I found my people." and and I don't even remember what they talked about because I was so moved, and I was just trying to take it all in. And I tell this story because I don't know that many people know what diaspora feels like. I mean, half the world does probably, but like if you have grown up in Hawaii and you've always lived here and you live in Hawaiian homes or you live, whatever it is, like even if you're not Hawaiian, if you take these things for granted, and I think at that point I just had this, and I call it now that I have worked with enough kupuna and the kind of getting my own kind of handle on a Hawaiian worldview. And I kind of think of our Queen Liliuokalani, as being my primary source. And then there's her students. And I don't know if they would say that they were her students, but there's relations, and then there's their students and their students. That there's this, that we believe in spirit. Spirituality is essential. And I heard Auntie Lynette say this on the podcast that you were on with her, and Manolani Meyer. And when she kept saying, like, no, I mean spiritual guidance. We're looking for guidance, and we were talking about Eho Mai, which was written by Auntie Edith Kanakaole. And I knew that, I mean, it was one of the first oli that I learned. I've done it since I came. And so I do believe that my kupuna were like you're helping all these people from other places. And for a while I wanted to be Puerto Rican. For a while I thought it'd be super cool to be Vietnamese. I was like, because I would go there and these people had such a rich, at that point, Cambodians were really struggling because of the trauma they had felt, and their kids were really disconnected. So that's kind of like the other end of diaspora, where you just can't find, I can identify with. I think I liked working with Cambodian teenagers. They're rough and very violent, but I think somewhere underneath I got it. Like, why they should be enraged. Like, they have no place, and their parents are working 3 jobs and aren't around to help them, and they don't want to speak the language because people make fun of them. And it's, and I worked, even at that point, I did family law and domestic violence, but somehow I would always be with teenagers. And so when I first came back to Hawaii, I worked for Kale Kanuha. And this is kind of my whole full circle story, because that is where I was initially introduced the concept of Ho'oponopono. And Auntie Edith's daughter, Auntie Ulu Garman, was my first cultural kumu. And she's not a hula person, but we worked with people in prison, people coming out of prison because they had been hurting their wives. And I had kind of gone full circle around. I used to only work with victims of violence. I never worked with perpetrators for the first 8 years of my career. And that's kind of a big no-no, like people moving camps, going from victims to, and my husband was a defense attorney and I was a prosecutor. And that too was just like not done. People that I worked with really did not like what my husband did. And how can you be married to someone who's swords people? And it's like, until we heal and get better, and going to prison is probably not going to accomplish that if that's all there is. Like, I could see this. So I think, and I'm not going to apologize, but I want to acknowledge, I know that I'm not very linear in the way I talk, because I see a lot of connections, but I wanted to share, these are the things that are the most important to me. I'm grateful for my college degree, for my law school degree, total miracle. And I remind myself of that sometimes when there's things I want to do and I'm scared to do them. And I think, how am I going to do that now? The fact that I live in Hawaii, that my kids have gone to immersion, that I have a husband who's not violent to me and I'm not violent to him. And we tried really hard never to yell. He's much better than me. He never curses. I try to stop. Like, they just, we paddle, we surf. But mostly I connect with my kupuna every day. Um, and I won't go on about that because I know it makes a lot of people really uncomfortable, that spirituality. But I think I want to, listening to Auntie Lynette that day, and now that I've been in more of the Ho'opono circles and Ho'opono Honua that was held on Maui, there are other people that do believe that when the wind's blowing, when a butterfly, when there's a bird, we are we have a kinship, right? With and I will just say it that way. From my sources of teaching, we do have a kinship. The land with the sky, with the wind. Humans are not the center. We contribute the least. We do the most harm. And we're here for a blip, right? So that's where I kind of am. There was a lot in between that I did, but because of the topic, what brings me to want to do a healing kind of teaching and a healing kind of mediation is to level what has always been to me a very uneven, unfair playing field, and to try and raise up and work with people who believe that you're important, I'm important, that our basic needs, that what is important to us matters. And if that means that I got to give up a little so that you can have more, then that's what is correct. Auntie Lynette, on a different call, she just said, we have to stop being so greedy. And I could, it's easy in our privilege, and I think that yeah, I'll stop there.
Thank you. I just thinking about some of the things you just shared, and first off, I would just say, well, starting off with diaspora, I think when folks just look up the meaning of the word diaspora, yeah, you get a general sense of what the dictionary will tell you, but it's very different to have lived that experience. And I think that's really what you're speaking to, the experience of living in the diaspora, of not having grown up in the lands or of your and your ancestors, the ancestral lands, as they say. Um, so I think it's beautiful how everything happens for a reason, and you the world works in magical ways, or whether it's spirituality, whatever you want to call it. It's drawing. I mean, it drew you back here to Hawaii eventually, even though you weren't born here. The fact that you know, I think there's lots of lessons to be taken from. Uh, Also, just and I get this comment sometimes about like you don't need to apologize.
Mm.
You just need to take it in. And I think one of the things that really, to me, I've kind of comes about to me is like not having to. How do we deconstruct the systems that have shaped us, especially the ones that are harmful, the ones that are set up in uh, through a colonizer lens? Such as one example I always give is when we talk about someone talks about asking like, oh, what's your ethnic heritage, or what's your background? Someone might say like, oh, I'm this percent, I'm this percent, and all of a sudden we're perpetuating the blood quantums that colonizers embedded in us early on, as opposed to saying we are whole this, we are whole that. Um, and I think to truly fully acknowledge, just because I am, yeah, I'm part, but I don't have to say part. I could just be like, yeah, I am whole, or like what generation. We have all these ways to like specify specifically, because if someone hears maybe, oh, you're 100%, oh, that's amazing, or like, but why can't we just celebrate the fact that you are whole, multiple spaces? And so as far as like shifting the perspective, and actually the person that brought that to my attention was Auntie Money Meyer, and as you mentioned her name, and I didn't realize it's like you're like I arrived and she had already left, but the word, So I hope you were able to connect on that shared experience at some point. I know
I don't
you.
think she even knows about, every time I'm going to talk to her, I want to say, oh, Anai Mersberg, who was this wonderful person in Boston, and she's still
Yeah,
in Boston. She's
yeah,
like, you need to meet Manolani Meyer. Just like Pael Duarte, introduced me to Auntie Nan Fei, who has been someone for me, like everything to me, friend, mentor, teacher, and kupuna now. Yeah, so I always want to tell her, but I realize, one of the values that I teach in my class with Ike Kupuna is following Auntie Pilahi Paki's framework, which is in the state constitution. Aloha is an acronym, and one of them is Ahonui. And like you're saying about language and structure, I will often say I'm so impatient. And I definitely have learned from my cultural teachers, like, you gotta wait, it's gonna happen. But someone said to me yesterday, this kumo from Kula Elementary, she said, we're talking like longing. Oh no, it was an auntie, a kupuna. This is what she's like. I don't mean like a month or a year or 5 years. I'm talking about 7 generations from us. And I realized that in some ways, though, like I was able to not track Manu down, because I could have, and that's a very kind of
yeah,
New York, Boston, DC thing to
yeah.
do where I was raised, right? Um, and but I'm going to congratulate myself because I just knew when the time is right and people would be able to talk to her, and like my sister met her, and I'm just like, poor me, why am I not getting to meet her?
Yeah.
But man, has it been worth the wait. I mean, it is just, it's literally 25 years that it took for me to meet her. And it's, Hawaii's a very small place. And it wasn't that she wasn't at things, but I just followed mine out. And same with Auntie Lynette. There's been other opportunities around Ho'oponopono when I was at Queen Liliuokalani's, they call it the trust now. And I just, it didn't feel right to me at the time. And I was scared to do it. Like, who am I to be a healer? And that kind of like, and people laugh at me and they say, like, why would you think you do this work? And it just seems so big and heavy. And but now, because of you doing that podcast with Maya, I'm gonna like really, I really love her. She's just, I don't, and even I met her like once, like in passing, but I feel like I know her because I watch all of her podcasts. But there are just these moments, and I think I was open because I was like, all right, something about this. I don't want to be a regular lawyer anymore, like, because I don't believe our systems serve in the ways that I would like to work. They absolutely serve some people. And my husband's a judge now, so there's all these conflicts and blah blah. But then now I'm learning, at least the concept of mana to me now is like, I do not have to be in a room with Maya. She does not have to acknowledge me. Like, we don't have to be friends. Like, I don't need to call her, because when I'm with her on these podcasts, I'm getting her essence, I think, as well as her forms also. But or when I'm not with you, I don't get to see you or talk to you as much as I used to. But I know sometimes I know what you would say. And so I think I laugh to myself, like I'm having a little conversation with you in my head, or I'm just wishing you goodness. Does this sound crazy? I probably people are probably listening to
No, 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 not at
example,
all. Not at all. Not at all.
but to me that is mana, like this kind of, and because of like, so it's hard when you're with people, generally speaking, that are very linear speakers linear thinkers and like rational and in this on the honua in regular life all the time. So I don't want to like overwhelm people who are listening by my going too far afield. Um, but there is an energy. I think most people would agree that energy exists. So if we called it consciousness,
so just to jump in briefly, I think I agree with everything you're saying. I think and maybe this is for folks who are more introverts will relate to this, that you don't necessarily need to be in a room full of people to be in company. You could be
mm,
by yourself and feel lots of comfort and not feel alone. And I think part of it also is, especially in this day and age where you can have the TV on, you can have a YouTube channel on, you can have a podcast on. There's other things to kind of keep you busy or keep you company while you're doing your chores or whatever it is that you have to do that day. And because like I'll share for myself, like I spend a good amount of time of my day like alone. And yeah, there's the emails. I mean, I'm not going to do that with other people. That's like I have to respond to those. And but even like, but I always have like something I'm listening to. Uh and it's a wonderful and I listen to it for the aspects of to learn something new, to like, oh, I really love, but I also as someone who does this, the moderation, the art of conversation. And I listen to it for like, oh, that's a really good question. Or like, oh, I love how they tactfully walked around that serious topic, but then got to it in a more kinder way. The art of the skill of conversation, of dialogue. That's why I listen to it. Of like, and just like in how a really great skilled moderator or facilitator will do that, but also bring a little humor into it at the same time. And eventually it just kind of circles back to whatever the conversation was like 20 minutes ago. And so I think that's why I listen to different folks. You talk about Maya. It's so for folks listening,
oh yeah,
it's not a
thank you.
podcast. It is we I used to be involved in lots of these virtual talk stories that live on the YouTube channel called Peacebuilding Initiatives. And so Maya has been a wonderful friend, human being, that has contributed as she's moderated as well with lots of wonderful other speakers. And so, but yeah, through that process, you get to learn about, oh, even though most of the times as a moderator, you don't normally share a lot
Mm,
about yourself because you're interviewing somebody else,
right, right,
you do still get to like learn about, oh, this is what this person finds funny, or this is what this person's bringing to the table, or like this is how this person's calming this person, because not everyone's at a different stage and we don't know what people's mornings were like.
right.
um and so we do get to know folks a little better. And the talk you keep referencing with Auntie Lynette, and for folks that want to listen to it, it's called Healing in Divided Times. Was about almost 2 years ago, a year and a half now, that we put it together. And yeah, it was an honor to just be in that space. Speaking of, you talk about diaspora. One of the biggest things, and I always share that I'm an immigrant, and I guess I could say I'm part of the diaspora as well. Um, but one of the biggest things I think is also this like feeling of what's the word? Not that you don't belong, but there's what's there's an academic word that I'm forgetting right now.
You can even just describe what you mean, like just in
like
not
like you don't belong, like you're kind of like a fake person on the stage, real performance. Oh my goodness, what is the thing in academia they talk about? uh um,
you're onto something because the birds outside my window are like, let him think of the word, don't rush him.
oh
So do you mean like you're not like it's like you're an imposter or like
That's
there's
what
no
it is.
like,
Imposter syndrome. That's
oh
exactly
okay
what it is.
okay
We talk about this in academia all the time, having imposter syndrome. It's many times it's because you're in a space that you're like, I don't know how I ended up here. I don't think, well, one, many times it's a space that people like you don't normally hold space in this.
mm-hmm.
Uh, and so in this case, with Healing in Divided Times, Maya was moderating. Uh, Manu was one of the panelists, so was Auntie Lynette, and then I was asked to be a panelist. And from a, a picture moment, just from the outside, I would think like, for me, it's like I am the one, the only man on this panel. Two, I'm the only non-Hawaiian person here. Um, so yeah, I mean, there's different reasons to like feel as an imposter. But it was truly an honor and one of those like memories and one of those experiences that I truly do value. Uh, as far as like having been able to, is I do so many of these, and one of the things I really love is the stuff that happens outside of the recordings, the before,
Exactly.
the after. That's
And
those are
when
the
they
true
turned to
gems.
you, Jose, and there wasn't that much time left, I was like, oh, because I know how I would feel, and I am a woman, I'm Hawaiian, and la la la, but I would have been like, ugh. And just because everyone, and but Maya had done such a beautiful introduction of you, which I don't always find that happens when I'm the person out usually. And did you remember Manu was like, "You got it, Jose."
Thank you, thank you.
um, and it really reminds me because you were talking about being a moderator, and um, I find that when I can feel the pilina, the connection between people, it's like voyeurs is not a nice word because I think it's like
And
has
even the word moderator feels kind of weird because it goes beyond that. It's
yes,
just,
yes.
sorry to interrupt, but like it really just feels like we're just having a conversation.
Those are the ideal. Yeah, when you
Yeah.
have someone who can allow it to happen, and I've seen you do it, I've seen Maya do it beautifully. But I think part of what you do, which I do in when I'm a good teacher, when I can allow moments for me to reflect back the story that a student has written or is talking about, I just see this whole different understanding. And I am convinced. So I used to call the last project in my class storytelling, but now, or the last assignment, but it's story listening. And the whole point of everything they do in the entire class is to be able to honor what it means my mom used to always say that. You got to know what it's like to walk in someone else's shoes. And To Kill a Mockingbird was like our favorite book, and she read it to us as kids. Um, and there's something about I think, and I heard Tulama Collier talk about Manu had said this to her recently. She talked about it at there was a dance performance of her talk story with the Small Town Big Art Mo'olelo program on Maui, which is there's a video of it, and oh, it was so fabulous. But she said Manu had said to her, "You really should go look back on what you wrote and what you did because we never do that." How often, Jose, have you gone to watch yourself do one of a presentation or something you've read, or
I I
do you ever do
to,
that?
to be completely honest, I don't recall the last time I've watched the full episode of, yeah, virtual
Yourself.
talk story or podcast episode, and I think
No wonder you don't know what
I
I'm talking about sometimes when
I
I'm
I
saying
think,
how fabulous
yeah,
you are.
I think there's probably over 250 videos or so that since 2020. Um, but yeah, I think part of it though to me is about valuing the memories.
That's how I am
The,
too.
and what I mean by that is the
Oh,
memory.
rather than performance.
Yeah, yeah, the because like if I watch some, I mean, I have skimmed through some, and all I can think about is like, oh, I was stressed about something, or like something was, because when we did virtual talk stories, I was moderating, I was managing the questions
Right.
from
You
the
have,
audience.
yeah.
There was a technology aspect of it as well. And so yeah, so there's a lot going on. And
And still yet, you are such a good listener. And that's how I describe you when people ask me about you. You're such a good listener. And I've always strived to be, as an attorney, as a teacher, as an executive director, as whatever it is I was, as a researcher, I think is where I actually probably hone those skills the most. But you're such a good listener. And to me, that is equated with feeling seen or recognized. And I don't mean like recognized because where you work and what you do and the car you drive and blah, blah, like your degrees. Like, I don't mean that kind of recognize. I mean it like Auntie Ulu used to say, you have to recognize your kupuna for them to recognize you.
yeah,
And if you don't make
very true.
time, right, to like acknowledge them, and I mean, for me to work in Pule and Ole and like Oli and really do those things, but like ever since I've been starting this whole kono, because Auntie Lynette says, "Aya ilo kone," you have to start with yourself, and then Manu will be like, practice. Like, we don't mean this like esoteric, like, and if anyone's willing to go watch that podcast, it'll be worth your time. Guaranteed. You will not regret it, and you're gonna thank me, even if you don't remember who I am, because that eho mai, doing eho mai with her in that way. And I've had other people say to me, I already know eho mai, like I don't need to do that with you. But it was such a reminder to me, like, no, you have to do it. You have to have this exchange. And I don't know what magic was happening for that, but I really do appreciate, because I go to a lot of your talks later. Um, and but I think there is something to what Kulama and Manu were talking about because there were dancers who would interpret her story that she did. It was an oral story. And I could see her reacting. And I wanted to take some video of her just so she could have it later. But it was sometimes I think like she was hearing it for the first time. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And like it's such precious stuff that she says that all the time, that it was like, but I think it's because she could see. So I think for me, watching these dancers interpret these very complex thoughts of hers, because I love art and music, and you do a lot of art, right? You have a lot of art projects that you do in pretty tough, highly traumatized, a lot of complex trauma and conflict back and forth, right? And I wonder, like humor, if it just helps our senses to kind of manage what is painful and
Mhm.
also see what is hopeful. We're still around to make
Yeah.
the crane or what, and I have your little cranes. And even though I'm not sure what it says exactly, right? Um, I do know this essence of it. And that's what I really loved about Manu. And I've tried to do this with other people when she said, just hum, because we get so caught up in the words and the
Mhm.
this and the, like, even when you were saying diaspora, I was thinking to myself, yes, a diaspora, and I just, that criticalness.
Yeah.
And to me, that is what colonization did. That's what things like slavery did. And until everyone can kind of acknowledge, every time we bombed another country, all the internment camps, like all of it, Vietnam, Korea, like until we can like really sit, not to justify. I often hear people like,
Yeah.
well, you know why we did it, but Auntie Nana Beery will say like, we need to talk about the specifics. Basically, the essence of this thing is
Yeah.
we did something very hurtful and harmful to people's aina in the water, right? I mean, and you had recommended a couple of beautiful videos that I watched, and it is heartbreaking and it's sad, but we need to like, until we do, I think it's hard to understand in other contexts, like structurally, like you're saying,
Yeah.
um, how we don't acknowledge. I thought of a thing that you and I did together where we were in a space and it seemed like the topic was about privilege and that evening out privilege. Um, but I felt like there are these moments in retrospect. It took me a long time to process this. What was so painful and very familiar is there were a couple of people that made comments to me, and I felt like they were putting me in my place. Like, you may be in this space if you follow the rules. And a lot of people have said that to me in Hawaii. Like, you use big words, you're very assertive about your opinions. Um, so could you just not be like that? We would like your Hawaiian face at this table, but can you just not be you? You know, and there is something very and I think that's why I want to do this healing work, is like, that is, as Auntie Lynette says, like, that is not mine to carry. Like, do
Yeah.
you think I need to behave in a certain way? But the truth of the matter is I think it really, my not following the rules at a very important thing to me that I did not get, it got back to me that it was
Mm.
because someone thought I was um didn't know my lane. um what was the other? Didn't understand the culture of the place. But I think what they were saying is, you weren't treating me as important as everybody else. And it's because I didn't know. Like, I don't, but also I'm just not that way. And my
Yeah.
dad, for all of his flaws, I mean, he had, and they were, and now that I get historical trauma, I kind of get why he was, but it didn't matter who you were, whether you were like cleaning the poop off the grass, whether you were cleaning the nastiest bathrooms in the airport, he treated those people like they were family. He would help them, you know, if they needed to open the door or like, and I do the same thing. And people think it's so weird, but it's like, just because I don't know you doesn't mean if Auntie's trying to put her bag up in the airport, right? Like, that I'm not going to help her do that. But it's so rare these days that I don't know how I got from this to that, but to me, that's, to me, the trauma that I'm trying to get at is that when someone else is being hurtful based on privilege and wanting to be over someone else, it just makes me crazy. Like, it makes me like a rabid dog where I want to say, like, no, you may not do that. But
Mm.
instead, I'm trying to learn mediation and be peaceful like you. I've learned so much from you and all these programs, Kate Sins, like West Hawaii Mediation, Love, CRA, our Conflict Resolution Alliance. Yeah.
Yeah.
But just to be, but you know what I needed? I needed to be around enough people, like all of, like everything I've been in recently, which I'm really grateful to both Manolani and Auntie Lynette, folks on Maui who ran, Keao, Kimo Keao. I mean, there's a lot of other people. I think I needed to be reminded that you may be in a space where people aren't criticizing you and giving you like hairy eyeball, like if you're not fitting in. Does that
Right.
like I don't have any Hawaiian bracelets. And so when we're at a really fancy event, sometimes I feel like judged that I don't have that thing. Or I do a lot of hand-me-downs, like a lot. So I'll be wearing like an auntie's mumu from like because she doesn't fit to it and she hears me and I love her and I love it, right? But
Yeah.
it's not the latest whatever. And I just, it can be anyone. It doesn't have to be like I'm not saying it's a Hawaiian person or not, but I I think that that's one thing that we could change, and that's one thing that I hope to spend my work on, is the conflict that we create because of our traumas of not feeling
Mm.
enough or not being enough. Or I mean, I struggle with that all the time, but instead of like just working it out and kind of owning that instead of spraying it all over, because that is something we can control, I think. I don't know, what do you think?
No, I thank you. I think this kind of reminds me of a conversation I was just having about structural
Mm,
violence embedded within our systems. Just because, from one perspective, it's, when people share with you, oh, you shouldn't be speaking up. Like, what it reminds me of is sometimes folks say, like, oh, there's protocols. There's protocols to how we do things. There's a process, understanding the culture, and I get that and I respect that. But at the same time, it kind of continues this like cycle of like comfort, and but on the other side it could be oppression, through another lens, because it's comfort. And what people are speaking or pushing back against what you're doing is you're creating a ripple, you're creating a discomfort to what they're used to. And when we talk about conflict, conflict is meant to be embraced. I truly do believe it's not meant to be. There's wonderful opportunities for learning, for growth, if we look at conflict through a certain lens. Um, but but with conflict comes discomfort, and as human beings, we don't really like that. We like routine,
right.
and that's why sometimes we'll call it, oh, it's protocol. These are cultural traditions. Uh, Not that I'm trying to speak badly of people's traditions, like we Easter just passed, or like there's some folks that do Easter egg hunts. Some folks go to church to honor Easter as religiously it was, the resurrection of Christ. But you know, but once more, there's these systems in place that I doubt, if you were at a church and you're like, I have a question about this, probably wouldn't go very well, because there's a certain protocol. You go there, you listen, you don't question, you don't have conversation with whoever's at the front. Maybe you'll get in line to, whatever the process, the different protocols that are embedded, or you're doing an Easter egg hunt, you're not, you just kind of go along with the flow. You're not like questioning.
Right.
Bunnies don't have eggs. Like, like bunnies are mammals. Like, they have, they have, when like a duck will have an egg, not a bunny.
Right.
So, I mean, that's a little more silly, but we don't
No,
question
but
these
I
things.
like
And so,
that, because if there were more opportunities, like people will often, one preschool teacher said my son was random. And I was like, because he would often ask, yeah, why do bunnies don't have eggs? They're mammal. I mean, he would definitely, and he would, but she would be upset with him instead of, just, I don't know, or thinking about it. Like, I wonder if we had more opportunities to think
to
more
be
deeply,
allowed to be curious and ask questions, that
because
which,
that's how we're going to deal with change, right? That's how we're going to get through conflicts and be able to change.
and
Um,
yeah,
yeah,
and part of it, it's creating an environment where you welcome that. Imagine,
right.
if you didn't grow in that type of environment, as much as you may want to create one, sometimes I have to even check in on myself of like, oh, am I just creating protocols right now?
Um, yeah.
It's
Oh, it can
systems of
be so
structural
performative,
violence.
right?
Yeah, because this is what I've been taught. So, it's like, so not that you need to go down the rabbit hole, and like, I always tell people, like, be kind to yourself. Just remember, you are your own worst critic. So just remind me, it's good that you're having these thoughts. But you talked about trauma a bit, and for folks listening, um, how do you see trauma show up, not only individually but collectively and across generations? especially within Indigenous communities? Is it this protocol? Is that part of the trauma? Or like, I mean, and there's
You know what?
multi layers
What
of
was
trauma, I
coming to
imagine.
mind, so I'm going to answer. So, what kept popping up to my mind are form letters. And let me
You
get,
said
yeah. So,
reform letters or form letters?
form letters.
Okay.
So, you're in a system, right? And I'm just going to say you're employed by a system. And someone comes and alleges you did something wrong, right? So, the way that I was taught is that, you would go to your supervisor and they would help you manage it, right? And if they have a certain like level of authority, they would actually manage that for you. They would help you, if it was a structural thing, um, they would help you with it, right? Instead of what I've been seeing is like either, well, why did you do that? Like a questioning of like you're kind of on your own to deal with this complaint or this person. And most times, and I do consulting for people, there's no basis to the allegations. There's just this kind of big, broad, I felt unsafe, or you made me upset, or you didn't do what you said, it's your fault that you did this. And there's no evidence. I think because I'm a lawyer, there's no evidence, there's no support for it. And I see leaders, or you're in charge of this thing and someone gets hurt and someone dies. And then their family comes to you like, what, how'd that happen? And they're just kind of like, well, because of the lawyers, because of this, because of that, I'm not allowed to talk to you. Right. And to me, that is not ho'opono. That is not like, it's just not true and it's not right. And I think that kind of trauma, when you think, for example, I would think that my employer would stick by my work. And it's very rare that I've worked for other people, but I have had people. And sometimes the conversation was like, you got to back up, like, this is going to work out that way, whatever, but they mentored me through it. I never felt alone. And I guess maybe that's what there is nothing worse than thinking you're part of a community that is protected and safe to only realize that you are not. And like either you're getting thrown under the bus or you're thrown out the bus or because you didn't follow the rules. If the rules are like, yeah, we all do good. People used to say this to me all the time. Like, I'm fine with you calling yourself out and saying what you did didn't work, but I'm not fine with you saying that like all of us have a part of that. And I was like, well, all of our kids are healthy and educated. I think we all have a little role, they're like, nope. Like, and then they would all just start like, I was like, no. Like, I'm looking at my side, but I'm asking you to look at yours too. And I think that is what Ho'oponopono is now that I see it differently. Like, you own your stuff, I own my stuff. But bottom line, I got to care about you, right? I got to care that I hurt you. And I have to want to, there's an empathy there and to me, the trauma that I am seeing or I'm feeling, I'll just own it, is when I see people happy about other people's deaths or happy that they are keeping people imprisoned, like happy that they're power overing, and I do think that trauma stems from colonization and imperialism, right? Just this long belief system, like, oh, you aren't using that land by building a big fat house on it. You have food on that land. You live in a kind of a transportable thing. So I'm just going to take that. Or like, you have lots of animals that you could kill, but you don't use all of them. But I could just take all your animals and then sell them to other people who don't even live here. It's just like, where did it come from? Like that kind of, but
Yeah.
it's real. And so I, spent the first 15 years of my life believing I did everything I was supposed to: get the degrees, learn the rules, wear the right suit, have the right shoes, have the right bag, speak perfectly, do have my hair up, like whatever it is, right? Have makeup, like, and be an attorney, that I would get justice and that people's lives would be better. And I really think that nothing I found in these systems was better than what I believe now about mediation, which is just trying to work it out with the people who are involved and just do the right thing, man, as right as you
Yeah.
can. And we don't know always. That's the hard part. You don't always know how it's all going to roll out. And it's interesting to me because people will say to me, I just want the judge to decide. And now that my husband's a judge, I crack up. But he will say too, like, I'm very limited in what I can give because of the law. So either you're going to win or you're going to win. And I don't feel great
Yeah.
about that, but I can't go beyond, right? And I've been in front of a lot of judges that they don't read any of, I just feel like whether it's HR systems, all of our big systems, to me, because we're always in them, there's a lot of trauma that happens when we think the world's going to work in a certain way, and it does for some people, but not for us. Um,
Are there
but
certain
trauma, yeah. Go ahead.
sorry, are there certain like misconceptions you would think there are when about trauma or conflict or healing? What are some
Okay.
common
Oh, yes.
misconceptions
So
that you
I
might see?
think that what happens is people think that trauma is internal based on some like physical or
Mm.
mental deficiency. Like you just can't handle. People say that to me, like, stop crying. You're such a crybaby. And I'm like, that uncle just talked about being in the war, now not having any family and PTSD. Like, you should be crying too, dude. Like, you know what I mean? Like that. Um, I feel like there's these, like it's like not cool to be smart. It's not cool to ask questions. It's just good to like comply, and kind of just people used to say like kick the can forward for like
Mm.
government, right? You have a new leader every 2 years or 4 years, and everyone seems different to me, and I'm just that I will own this. From people I've known, it feels like they just become part of that thing that they've joined, and they become less of themselves. And I can identify
Mm.
with that, because you get so into the work, and then and I was never like huge on rules that didn't make sense to me. I would change them. I would drive my staff and my partners crazy. They'd be like, that's not what we're going to do. And I'm just like, it's not working. So I think I'm a little bit on the margins in that way, but starting to think that I was the only one that helped kids, or I'm not, you get to be in this. And I think that's where trauma stewardship, it's this book that talks about what happens to you when you burn out because you're not taking
Mm.
care of yourself. So I do think wellness has an aspect of trauma, because if you don't pay attention to it and you just keep driving on, it's not good. Like, so I would say, I think a lot of trauma is external. Like, it's not your fault. It's not because of you. It's not anything about you. It's something has happened to you. However, the other side of that is that when you start to recognize the impact it's having on you, what I'm learning from Hawaiian healers and Hawaiian ways, like, you gotta forgive. Like, you gotta get some rest. You gotta,
Mm.
right? You can't just, because what can happen is, so there's this book, right? It's called Trauma Stewardship, by Lipsky. And I got it during the fires, and I was reading it on the plane. And just the first page, you could just look like at the very, and you probably can't see it, but there's a wheel. And the things are like, are you feeling helpless and hopeless? Do you have a sense that one can never do enough? Are you hyper vigilant? Diminished creativity, inability to embrace complexity, minimizing chronic exhaustion and physical ailments, disassociative moments, inability to listen and deliberate avoidance, sense of persecution, guilt, fear. And I remember feeling, I mean, and when I did domestic violence work, I would start to see things, people killing their partners, or, burning their dog, their partner's dog. Like, I mean, just things that, like, yeah, I would rather not see, right?
Yeah.
Sexual abuse of kids and But what can happen is if you don't manage those kind of external things, I guess that's where, it's called vicarious traumatization. And Judith Herman talked about it in relation to helpers around domestic violence or military. And so, it's interesting. Recently, I think I'm really going to try and see if that might be a client base for me, because I feel like we really don't take care of those folks who've been to war for us. And there's a
Mm,
long standing,
yeah.
people have trouble with their families, and it just like, but anyway, but if you don't deal with it, but the problem is that we really don't have mechanisms to deal with grief and loss. So, you could lose your job and it could be, horrible. You could, there's the big things, but then there's all the little tiny cuts as well. And so trauma gets, I think, people use it in a lot of different, like, you traumatized me. But I would say, like, there are conditions, right? And if we, like our land, if we have wetlands, if we have, if our land is in good shape, when a big flood comes, when a big deluge like the last rains came through, we can handle it, right? But if for 30 years there's been no water, yeah, we're gonna have some problem, and it's all been diverted, and these dams that haven't been like, or whatever it is, right? So I kind of, mental health to me is like it's like a dichotomy of what has happened to our ancestors, what has happened to our family, but also what we manage every day that would, and some people would say it's because of what you are, but I don't think so. I think some people, when you're really, that's the downside, I think, of being super connected and trying and not kind of defending yourself and shutting everyone off, is that um it hurts you more. If you don't have your
Mm,
defenses up, it could hurt you more. But if you do have your defenses up, then none of the good stuff can come in. So the work that I'm doing is, now I'm starting to limit it more to when families are going through a really tough change that they didn't expect. Like their kid has a chronic health issue or a
mm,
terminal health issue, or the grandma that took care of everyone is now no longer to take care, able to take care of anyone, and she needs to go to a lot of doctors. Someone's about to die, they haven't dealt with the whole thing. So it's more me trying to help people who are, um how do you say, it's like a life, it's a normal transition. So my initial thing was I would be a death doula, because I think I did not manage my mother's death well. um, and I just avoided it. I thought I just kept telling her, please don't ever die. And then she died young. And, and it really brought to bear for me that there are people around the world who really have, and we used to have rituals around death. And without those rituals, people can really hold on to a lot. And then, so that's the kind of, like, I've had this experience and I'm not treating it and acknowledging it, or there's nowhere to go. And that's why I think mediation is just such an awesome thing, because it can be done by anyone in different ways, in different spaces, and it's very time limited. Whereas like a court system, right, is so, or any, you call to go talk to a counselor, it could take you 6 months to get an appointment, and then it can not be the right person, right? So, and I kind of jumped to mental health. So for about 5 years, I was working on mental health issues within the workplace. And it was really for leaders who have mental health issues, or who have family members, like they're caretaking, and then employees who do. Um, but there really are no mental health providers. Like in Hawaii, there
mm,
aren't enough of them, and a lot of
yeah.
people don't have insurance. So I just like had to veer away. But that's what's kind of also, I think, you don't have to be, and I do have a degree in psychology and I've done a lot of counseling, but I think is having more of a like reciprocal relationship where you care about someone. Does that make sense? Like you're caring about them apart from your job and getting a paycheck. And I have not cracked that nut yet. because some of the greatest work that I've done thus far with kupuna, with their families, people with sick kids, like, and they really were able to get what they needed from the medical system and their schools. I don't get paid for that. And I don't even imagine how I would get paid for it. Like, you know what I mean? So I think there's a lot of these informal things that we could do for each other that would improve our mental health, which would then improve our physical health. Because I think, I don't know about you, but in this book, and other things I've read and studied, your brain changes, your body changes when you are really, really hurting and stressed without relief for a long time. So sorry. Did I get to any of the parts that were looking?
No need to apologize. I and honestly, so yes, you talked about conceptions, misconceptions of trauma. So thank you. I have found that there's like little flags
Mm,
that I can. So not to like apologizing, I think is part of it.
mhm.
There's a story there, and we don't have to go into it, but but I imagine
No,
there's a story there.
exactly.
Yeah, I mean,
Exactly.
for people who smile all the time, there's some trauma there because I find that folks sometimes, not to say all the time, but um, people who are smiling a lot, it's to make up for
Mm,
not wanting sometimes to have their trauma on display.
yeah,
So
yeah.
it's easier to put on a smile.
Mm,
And it's also part of like, you put your best foot face forward so that others don't
right.
have to experience that. And then that's part of
Mm,
like some cultures, that's what they kind of embed into you early on.
mhm.
I did ask about some, also some, ideally some misconceptions folks might have about like healing, but and we can get to that, but I do want to talk a little bit about your class, the Iti Kapuna Indigenous Frameworks for Peace Building. And what would you say are some foundational principles of Indigenous peace building that you wish more people understood?
When you're looking at the Aloha chant or the state constitution, and there's Akahai, Lokahi, Olu Olu, Ha'aha'a, and um, Ahonui. Uh, so grace, patience, humility, these are kind of a piece of these things. Um, it says that our leaders are really um, should live by these, this spirit of Hawaii and the way that they engage. And it's not that we have to as people, but we use that in the classes. What could it achieve in place of some of the opposite of those things? So there's a term that I found. It's a Hawaiian psychologist from a long time ago, 55 years ago, and he says uses the words aloha ole, and what he means is like not aloha. And there's a whole chart that he has, but like it kind of, so for me, sometimes that's how I know I'm not being gracious because I'm criticizing someone, right? I'm raising my voice, so I'm not being olu olu because it's about kind of
Mm,
self-regulation. Um, and what difference would it make if people really were careful about their words and that realize how much they do have power, or even your thoughts when you start thinking all those negative things about other people and or about yourself. So I think that's one thing I wish people, and instead of pointing outwards, um, you take that kind of a lesson as like, oh, am I, do I do that? Why does that bother me? My mom used to always say, when you notice something about someone else, it's probably because you do it, but
it's like a
it's
mirror.
real, right? Because that's why it drives me crazy, right? Um, so that's one piece. Another piece, though, I would say, which is not explicit, but by the end, is really valuing that you have and I don't mean to sound like a cult member, I've been criticized, but that we all have a divine purpose. Auntie Pualani used to say we all have a gift.
Mm.
But I really do believe, like, why did some of us make it through COVID and the rest of us didn't? Like, we are on this earth for a reason. Like, and Auntie Creates says, get a grip. I just found this quote and not from someone else. And what she means by it is leave your legacy. You have something and you can give it, like, contribute, right? And go with it, right? So, what can we do? But that really does require space and time. So, the exercises are very unique and that they are not in the journals, it's journaling about what do I think about this. And they're listening to other people, but I don't want to hear about what Jose Barzola says about that. Like, yeah, I want you to listen to the video, but I don't want you to write about what he says. I want you to write about what is coming to you, like what's coming forth. But those are very unfinished thoughts, right? And so it's very uncomfortable. Talk about uncomfortable. And I think they're scared that when they turn things in, that I will be critical. But instead, I'm saying, what are you thinking when you're talking about that? What meaning does that have for you, right? Rather than, because I did this my whole career, like, oh, da 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 says, or do this because that person. And I think I did it a lot even in this talk. It's very common for me to not just share an opinion. I feel like I have to give you like a footnote and then tell you why I used it, and I think it is somewhat about self-valuing. But the truth is, I am called, like, how I've had people say to me, how do you know that word? Someone asked me, how do you know Colorado is a state? Just like, right? Because of who I am and who they were, just like, what? So I think I come by it honestly. It's not that it just out of nowhere, but I find that no matter where people are from, no matter what color, how much money, whether they're from here, whether they're not, there is a real kind of phenomena of I am not good enough. What comes out of
Mm.
my mouth is not going to, or the way I say it is wrong. And I just did it a minute ago, that's too long. And they will say, I'm just babbling, but honestly, Jose, these thoughts are just beautiful. What is inside there and I keep saying, like, it's not right for you to keep all these thoughts inside your head and not share them with the world because they're so, I mean, when I read their journals, when I hear their stories, I keep them with me and I integrate them. And then I'll think, oh, that's what they meant. And then when we're having this back and forth, I can see them having epiphanies as they listen. So I guess, there's many kupuna have said, you have everything, Jose Barzola, you have everything inside of you that you need to make the decisions that you need to make, right? But that requires you actually have enough time to listen to what you say and not feeling, and, I've had and I'll just say it. I can tell there's some people because I was such a driven kind of professional throughout my life. I was always doing fellowships or working at a pretty high, like, front facing job. So they'll say it is like Homer Simpson, like you said, like receding back into the hedge, like, and people think I've like lost my mind, that, and there's all these stories I've heard going around gossiping about me. But the truth is, I tried to heed my kupuna's call. And that's what I like. If you know someone's right, you should do that thing, even though it's inconsistent. And so I spend more
Mm.
time by myself and I try to listen. But, after 53 years of doing one thing where I'm only listening to other people, think, like my brains. And Clay Kanuha told me that she heard one of the kupuna at QLCC that I worked with in Hilo, that the uncle would say, you got to just up here and you got to just use this, right?
Mm.
And what is that telling you? And I promise you, for me, when I'm quiet enough, when I'm healthy enough, when I've eaten, when I've slept, like, I know I can't explain. The problem is I can't explain why. Like, I know what the right thing to do is, but I can't tell anyone why. And I have to fight myself. Like, it's okay, you don't know why you're doing it. But when I saw that video and talked to Katie about it, to learn about this workshop with Auntie Lynette, right? And then I got invited to this other workshop, and then I called you about Kate Sims, and then I called, like, I don't know why. And I think it's my kahuna, like, and God working through me, but it's me. I just have a sense I should do something. But at every score, when I said, "Oh, I'm gonna go do this," I mean, I just got drilled. Why don't you go to West White? You know, and it's everyone wants to understand my plan. And I hear one of my aunties, "Don't explain yourself." I spent my life trying to make people understand, you know, and I think in this class, I see growth where people start to realize, like, I have something to say. I do know a lot,
Mm.
but the forgiveness part and just so I used to work with a lot of teenagers, and they'd say, "Auntie, when you respect me, then I'll respect you." Like, it doesn't go like that. You got to give love, and then you get it. And they're just like, you know, I mean, we would have these long arguments. I'm like, just try it. Like, what do you have to lose? You already know how to do the other thing, right? But
Right.
what, I mean, people will take these steps to remedy these entanglements and these previous hurts. And they say, I would never have done it if I didn't really think about the kind of person I want to be, regardless of the outcome. And it doesn't always work out for them, but it seems like it's always better than not practicing aloha. Like, where are you going to get with that? And I think it is about, my mom used to always say, and I talk about her a lot because she's not here on this earth anymore, but whenever I'd be like, should I do this? Because I wanted to do something that I knew was not correct, but I could totally get away with because everyone else did it. Or should I do this, which I don't want to do? She's like, well, are you going to be able to look yourself in the mirror? And I would say, right. And I would, all these rationales. And I'm so glad I had her because I have that part of my personality, I think, that I just want to do what we all do. I just want to do what I want, you know? And when I would say, that's just too hard, mom, and no one else thinks like you, and everyone else is doing it, she'd be like, it's your choice, right? It's your life. And that's the hardest part of mediation for me. And the hardest part of this class is I never try and help anymore. Like, I used to always try and help youth and help this, that, and give people
Yeah.
suggestions. And when I see the students really struggling because they just want to do what they always know, they'll turn in assignments and I return it. I'm like, that's not the assignment. It's a beautiful narrative, though. It really is beautiful. You know, it's beautifully written. And they're like, well, this is the kind of thing I've done before. I'm like, no. And they're very high performing. And I'm sure it's, but I know it's hard on them. So I try to do it in a compassionate way. But that is my love for them, even though they don't feel it. And I know they're DMing about me and people like are not happy with me. When they get over that, you can do it. That you can follow the direction. And sometimes they, I think, are treated like they're special other places because they're very talented. They have like big gifts that people can see, right? That they get a lot of attention for. But I
Mhm.
do some, but you're like the rest of us. We all struggle. We all have to grow. But the thing that is different from my classes is about growth and the progress of your process. It's not about the product. You're never going to get to like some beautiful story in 16 weeks. I don't care who you are, 8 weeks. Like, you know, you need to do edits or just, there's a lot.
Yeah.
And it's so different. So it's always about like, are you trying? Are you, and it's being present. So I can tell when people are just cutting and pasting. And you'd have been so proud of me. I used AI the other day for something because it was something that it just needed to be reduced to a count, like a word count, right? It wasn't like, and it was like comparing these three documents that would have taken me 100 years. And so I guess my point is like, there are times when shortcuts or taking other people's words or help is great. But then there's times when you just gotta like kind of stand alone in yourself and just to try to figure it out. And I always tell them, you'll never have to do it again. You hate this process. You just really, but at least you tried it. And I think I designed this class because I've seen so many places just like stuck. Like, we've always done it this way. And I'm like, the world is changing. Like, literally, there's no land there. There's only water there now. And people are just like, well, we never did it before. So let's just rebuild what we had. Like, but that's what just got like taken. Like, why would you do, you know? So I think part of, for me, change is inevitable and it offers opportunity for goodness. But if we continue to just see it as a pain in our butt, not what we're used to, and why do we have to do this? And we like it the way it is, and we want to keep our stuff. It just doesn't seem like it's been working. I know why we want to do
Thank
it.
you.
Yeah.
How do you, so you talked about mediation a bit. How do you see Indigenous approaches differ from Western models of mediation or conflict resolution practices?
Mhm. Well, one is the spiritual aspect
Okay.
is at least in the thing that I'm
Yeah.
doing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and and I think things like not being greedy, so practicing aloha is, I guess, another central
Yeah.
thing. Um, and like not finding joy in beating someone just to beat them.
Yeah. And I guess this also kind of goes in hand with so the indigenous practices themselves sound as like, or I guess because my question was more my follow-up was around
Yeah.
sharing an example of how indigenous practice or value has been especially powerful in helping communities heal. But what I'm hearing is the approach that you're taking itself, just by it being so different, is part of that healing process. By allowing spirituality into the room or energy or whatever folks,
Right. Yeah. So even if we were
like,
going to use energy, right? Like
yeah,
it's not me. And I think this is something that is different, really different that I'm noticing, but it might just be me, is that I've always, in all the work I've done, I would care about people. And kids are more likely to say this, but I've had men in prison ask me this, like, why do you care about me so much? But the truth is, like, I love you. Like, and Auntie Malia used to say that. I found out, and it made me feel better because people really freak out when you say that to them. I mean, it is very unnerving.
you should,
And so I stopped
yeah,
for a while, right? Because I didn't like I didn't like the discomfort. But once I heard her say it again, and I've tried it, and once people can kind of, but I think that the idea of lokahi, like we are all connected, whether we like it or not, and we are connected to the ground and the trees and the birds. And when we, I think when we like don't recognize that connection, it's harmful to all of us. So I would say,
yeah,
and you know, people have said to me when I was a lawyer, you know, you're crossing professional bounds, or you know, they have the checklist. Like I can keep those 10 things in my head while
yeah,
I ask the person, "How are you?" Because they want to get this stuff done too. They want to get the thing, like they don't want to be here all day. But I could just let them tell me. But in that listening, I could also start to hear what wasn't said. And sometimes, like with grant, I was a grant writer. I don't do that anymore, but you know, I'd be talking to clients and they'd be telling me what they want. And I would say, like, how are you gonna get that from this? And
yeah,
like, well, we'll get $20,000. Like, but yeah, let's, you know, and I would take them back to take a look because I listened to the first conversation was like an hour and a half. And people would always question me, and I would take minutes, what everyone would say, because I don't remember what they're saying. So then the second round, I'd be like, yeah, I just looked at this, and for you to do this, you're actually going to have to write another $50,000. Get that done, you know. And so a lot of times I wouldn't even get the whole gig of $25,000 because after $1,500, I'm like, this isn't for you. And I think that's the benefit of not being so like rigid and formulaic. There are benefits to
mm,
for sure and
yeah,
algorithms, but not for people stuff when you're hurting and you're trying to find a solution. And um the beautiful thing I've seen, and I've seen this at West Hawaii Mediation because the form that they do, I think, is not trying to solve someone else's problem. Like that's very different from all the other work I've done. Like I was tasked with finding solutions, you know, that would work for people forever, ideally, which is kind of silly thought, right? How can you do that for someone? So I always learned the person has to decide. But there was like, whereas with mediation, it just feels like the question is, what are the possibilities? And that to me feels very Hawaiian. It's not about like, you did this thing and you suck, and you know, pointing and you owe me. And this kind of, to me, it feels like you're very much like this naturally. I can see why you're would be a mediator, I have to work really hard at it, not to take a side, that there are no sides. Anti-pilahi paki, our queen says that there are no sides. We're all part of the same thing. And if you can think of life that way, and I will just say, as a leader myself, I wish I had taken more time to just stop sometimes and really think what was being asked of me. And I always thought, what, if it were me in this situation, what would I want? But the truth of the matter, it doesn't really matter what I would want in this situation. It matters what you want and what you're willing to do, and it's always like a risk, a benefit, and you give, you take, what are you going to get in? But I think what's the most different now that I'm thinking about it, whether it's healing grief, like kaumaha, that deep, when it's change and loss, is that concept of ahonui and time. That we cannot put these like artificial time limits on things, and we may not know. So you do need to have some faith that if you're acting right and I'm acting right, if we don't choose the right thing, we can pivot. If neither of us are acting really with the law, we're going to get an order, we're going to have to follow it, and then it's not going to work for anyone. We're going to be back where we started. So, but that time thing, like when people ask me for work as a consultant, there were sometimes they were hard projects, and I would say, this is not ready. And they'd say, just whatever you think. And I say, nope. I said, you can fire me and do whatever you want, but I'm telling you, like, it's not right. It's not ready to fall off the tree, whatever euphemism or metaphor.
Yeah.
But if you can wait it out, that's why I think our kupuna, like, when I can just follow what I know is correct, good things happen, but there's not that guarantee. But like, really, there's never. I mean, I had jobs where I thought I would be there forever, and it didn't happen. So I think part of healing and is kind of letting go of some of that controlling too. So my hope is that in the work that I do now is that I can help to think like those big system structures, kind of understand when you're doing kilo or trying to see what's happening, to just accept that is instead of trying to change it, which I did for the first 5 years of my career, like banging up against trying to change like a huge thing, right? And it was an older kupuna who did a lot of, he worked for DLNR. And he just said, you're trying to move a cruise ship. You invite all these people on your cruise ship, and then you have no idea why you can't turn on a dime. So he helped me, and I just drew kind of a diagram of one man's canoes and two-man canoes, and that's how I work. So that's how I work in my class too. I just do one-on-one with each of the students, and then they get a relationship with theirs. One, with each person tells their story, and then they have an engagement one-to-one. It's not all the class saying how great the story is. It's each person trying to reflect back to the person what they heard to help that person have more clarity. Even though like they might not really understand where they're getting at, I'm trying to help you have more clarity about what you're talking about instead of trying to impress me and move me and please me. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, most definitely. It appears to be a very like personalized approach to, or individual approach, I guess, as opposed to a cookie cutter approach, which tends to be more common. Because as we know, not everyone's the same. And so, and it also puts some responsibility on their peers to engage with each other, and especially in a asynchronous format. I know some folks are like, "Oh no group work. Like I just want to. What do I need to do to get the A, or get a good grade?" And that's that.
So true.
So, um,
Yeah.
I guess that's kind of like an example of how to create pathways to healing within systems. Would you say within like a classroom environment? Or are there other
I've
ways that?
seen such
Yeah.
amazing things happen, and I would never have thought because online, asynchronous. But I read this about text somewhere right between girls. I think that asynchronous gives me a moment to like really think before I respond. And then when they read my comments, they can make sure they're in the right time and space to digest what I'm saying. And then we can clear up a lot of miscommunication. But I think there aren't enough spaces for individual work. And I know it looks to others like it's a lot of work, but it doesn't feel like work to me. But there are people who just kind of don't want to dance. They're just not into
Yeah.
it. So I give them one
Yeah.
and I'm very clear. This is it. This is all like, are you sure you want to do this? Because I'm not everyone's cup of tea for sure. I got through my whole college education. Oh, what do you want me to say? It's just a big competition of who is gonna
Yeah.
like regurgitate that, and I think that just it didn't work for me when I actually had to make some decisions and think for myself. And because I am
Yeah.
a pleaser. And so but it just, yeah, I feel like we get to, so I guess, those structural things that I don't care for that make me feel bad or an outsider, or like I'm not being seen or heard or can't share my gifts. I don't feel that in my classroom because that's kind of all there is. But that is a scary thing. So
Yeah.
I also share things about myself. I admit my mistakes, and I think that's strange sometimes. Um, but I'm trying to create I benefit a lot. I learn so much from them, especially when I don't understand, or especially when, someone gives me something and that's not the thing and I have to give it back. Cause it'd be so much easier for me to just say, fine. Like, and I think people are like, I shouldn't say, I'm surprised you read it. I was like, I don't read it. Like, I made you do it, and I think, and maybe just because I was gone for university so long and I was in a work context, and I'm just so glad that anyone wants to learn anything. Because usually in companies that I've been hired for, people are just, that's not where they're at. They have to produce something. So I tell everyone this is a learning environment, it's a learning space because we aren't delivering anything. It's super cool in that way, right? There's nothing at risk besides, well, our egos and all of that. Yeah, it's one of the most meaningful things I've ever done. And I think it must be because of this reciprocity of energy and learning. And I do feel for people who really just wanted that cut and paste kind of, or this not, I don't mean cut and paste, I shouldn't say that, but they know how to do that. They know how to read, they know how to synthesize, they know how to, they're beautiful. And I tell them, like, you're a beautiful writer.
But I think that also speaks to the protocols once more, the conditioning of our educational system. And many times I find that in education, it's you enter a classroom, you figure out what is it that the faculty wants to hear. How is it that they want to hear it? And so I write for that person.
Right.
Eventually, you do this enough that you're writing for a system, and sometimes not necessarily for yourself. And so it sounds as though you're doing the adverse of like, no, I want you to write for yourself. I want to hear your voice. And that's part of the healing aspect. Almost like the trauma in itself is the conditioning that we've had to do, adapting to all these
You're
different
like,
people.
love having therapy for free. My clothes aren't really free, but I mean, it just cracks me up. But I think so. There must be healing to it, and I can see them, and they're not afraid to write, and they're not afraid to speak anymore because I said like the ums, like that means you're thinking. So I'm glad you say or when they say, "Oh, I said that," but now I realize I don't really mean that. Like correcting, like that. Yeah, that's where you're supposed to be because you're reflecting. You're thinking out loud and you're letting the thoughts flow. And at the end, they do a self-assessment, which is long. It takes them like a couple
Yeah.
hours, I think, and they could just do, but it does go to their grade. And well, kind of, but it's so, for me, the sign that my design is working is they never mention me. Never. They talk only about themselves. Like, I started this, and I might not be, and the only rule is no woulda, coulda, shouldas. Like, you can't say, I wish I had done this, I should have done that. You
Yeah.
can only speak about your strengths and your growth and what you learned. And you can't even couch it in like, because, lateness, like time for me, that's the other thing. You can get things until the end. You won't be penalized. Like, you will be penalized because it's hard to do it all at the end. But yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, and but it's so wonderful, Jose, to just be able to hear people's inner workings of how you can come out of this, I'm not good enough, to like, oh, I think I am good at this,
Yeah.
and what they produce is like mind-blowingly good. And I
Yeah.
kind of feel sad that we're the only ones that get to hear. But it's just not meant to be
Yeah. Yeah.
yet,
No, it's okay.
so, and I think that's what the difference is. It's so strange to them. I'm like, you're not creating this for anyone, and no one's gonna read, like, no one reads any of their written, because for
Yeah.
me, teaching writing has always been, people really freaked out about writing.
Yeah.
And but once they realize this is not a performance, this is just process, like, it relieves. And I try and remind myself of that when I'm working on things, because I get all bent out, and I put so much pressure. So that's what I love about it the most, is I think I have grown so much because of it. I don't know if that's like
So, sounds like there's healing on both ends happening.
and
That's what
also
I'm
like
hearing.
concrete learning,
Yeah.
and I am impressed, because sometimes when I wanna, like, oh, it's okay, or feel better, I remind
Yeah.
myself that is not your role. They got to make themselves feel better, whatever
Yeah.
that means to them, right?
Exactly.
And it's helping me to be a better mediator too, because there's so many times I want to be like, what if you just did this? Jesus will be like, stop suggesting. That's your idea. That wasn't even
Yeah.
on their radar. You're just complicating things. And it's so wonderful to be in such a safe space, but also hear the truth. Because that's, and that the drafts are hard for them. I don't think they say, like, no one's ever, and I think in school I never had someone edit my work, but when I was publishing,
Mm.
my bosses did. I was really lucky.
Yeah.
I mean, painstakingly went through. And that's how I became a good writer, is I just did it a lot. And um,
What would you say are some like everyday practices grounded in Indigenous knowledge or sort of approaches that people can begin integrating into their lives for healing?
so I use music for this, or art,
Yeah.
or the sky, but to really start with positive. Like, there's so much good in the world, and where
Mm.
do I see it in this moment?
And
Um,
finding that positivity in all the noise.
right, right. And for what is and what is not. And that can be, so that's one I would say. Pule for me, which, they're
Mm.
Hawaiian Oli, so I'm learning Hawaiian language. I sometimes wonder if it was only in English I would do them. I have to be honest about that. But because I'm doing, and there's a cadence and an ear to it, singing. Um, in the whole Pono class that I took, Mama's wife did this whole piece on um, mending things, and kind of that recycling and sewing and patching. And so I think having a something, and like, I just went back to paddling, and I haven't gone really seriously probably for 15 years. Once I had kids and my husband paddled, it was just kind of like at the end of the road for me to get to practices. But I realized that I am not in the water paddling.
Mm.
A lot of the things that I need to notice around me, I don't get, because I'm working, or something else, gardening. So I think connection in nature, believe it or not, I know that it sounds so strange, but just to put your feet in the grass to be outside. Um, and it's hard. We live in Hawaii, we live in a beautiful place, but so many people I know like haven't been to the beach, haven't been, and I get it. I really, but even if you're at the market, right? There's trees and there's sky. Well, it depends where you are, but um, just trying to find, I think, connecting with something other than and doing something kind for someone else. That is, I think, that's my little added. Um, More recently, I would say, so my other style of mediation, which I'm trying to build, it comes from what I learned in Hilo when I first came here from Auntie Ulu. It's called Ho'okuhihava, and I think that's how you say it. And it's that I just work with you, and then I would work with your wife, and then I would work with your kids or not, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or and I wouldn't go like, or I go with you to something that you got to go work out, but I'm just with you. I'm not. And so my other thing is, I would say almost everyone has someone, one person, and it doesn't have to be someone you're friendly with, or that like someone popped into my life through the strangest way yesterday, and but like to be open to that, like
Yeah.
and let them support you and you support them, but
Be
not like a
receptive.
helper.
Be receptive to what comes your way in life is what I'm hearing.
Yes, yes, even though it's too extreme.
Not sometimes it's not planned, and it's just beautiful happenings of life that this is the right moment or this is the right time for us to connect.
And if you're feeling like, oh, I want to share this song, or oh, I want to tell this person how much I appreciated this thing, you don't think to yourself like, oh, that's so dumb. Like, why would I do that? That's so weird. Like my kids say all the time, you're so weird. But when I'm engaging with people at the market or wherever, like my dad used to do it, and I used to think it was so weird too. But it feels good, right? It just
Yeah.
it's so I would say connecting with anyone is better than being alone and suffering, and just reach out to someone because you're worth it. Someone's gonna miss you. I can tell you. I mean, and having worked somewhat with suicide and not like as a professional, but as a person, I've come to believe that for some people, we should all have the choice of whether we're on this earth, right? And however, I also think that if people felt like they had one person that was with them in this moment, they might not, like they might realize like that person will miss you, right? That and there are a lot of times when people just feel so nothing's worse than feeling.
Yeah.
And even if you do have a kua or things or that you look at my doggy and like she's so good to me, and I don't walk her every day like I should. There's something about, and I do have this, and I feel really appreciative. Sometimes if I just reach out to you, if you can't reach me back, then it's fine. And I would encourage everyone to find those kind of relationships. Oh, maybe that's what I was just thinking of today because I called someone. Is not being around people that make you feel like crap, especially when you're down. Like, just don't do it. Like, don't do it. Don't take the bait. Like, don't do things for other. Like, but if you're with someone and all of a sudden you're just starting to feel junky, or you're on your phone reading crap and you're just like, but you want to be part of that collective or whatever. It's really, I don't know if it's like this for you, Jose, but it's hard for me to walk out on something. Like if I'm sitting in something and I see a lot of pilikia, there's been times when after I'm like, why don't I just stand up and walk out? Right? Just instead of like being I was staying with someone, we were on a work trip and we're sharing a room. And this couple next door was just going bananas. They were drunk, they'd come home late. We were both woken up. And we had like two little 6-year-olds. So I guess this is kind of what I mean. Like sitting in our beds, but all we had to do is get up and go to the front desk. And the lady, the next day was like, why don't you just come change rooms? Like, I didn't want to tattletale. You know what I mean? I didn't want to feel like I was listening. And we were both like, we were so stressed. But I think I see a lot of people, I can see they're nervous. people aren't being nice to them or they feel uncomfortable and they just stay there. And I've done it 100 times. And when I can just not and reach out to someone that makes me feel good, um, I think it makes all the difference, don't you?
Yeah, no, most definitely, most definitely. I think one of the things that um, you do that you don't say, which I think is very powerful, and I imagine you do this. Well, you do this in our conversation right now, and as I've known you throughout the years, but uh, you do a lot of storytelling, and I think that's very powerful. I don't know if that's part of restorative approach or indigenous, uh,
Yes,
you
I will
know,
say yes, it is.
but
People tell stories. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I will say that just from going back to being immigrant, being part of the diaspora, like that really connects with me. That's something that I mean, I grew up hearing stories. And I never considered myself to be a storyteller, but I think as you get older, you collect stories and you keep telling them over and over again. You get a little better. I would never consider myself a storyteller, but I am very thankful for the stories that I've been able to receive and
Mm-hmm.
how they've helped shift my perspective or provided an extra lens that I never would have considered before. And I think that's really part of it. I mean, you're providing space to sit, not literally sit, but like be in a space and have this conversation. So, and part of the knowledge base, it's not just the knowledge that's on the books, but it's the knowledge that's in song, that's in the stories that we carry. And so the students are sharing their stories with you, which makes it even more powerful, I think.
Right.
So I just wanted to
Thank you
say,
for saying that. I really appreciate that
well, I think part
you're
of it
saying
is shifting this, we for folks listening, that I know we just referenced the title of our class is Ike Kapuna, but Ike meaning knowledge and
it. Yeah,
Kapuna meaning elders.
thank you. Thank
And I think getting beyond the concept of that knowledge is only in the books. Knowledge
you.
is only something that, oh, I mean, some people might be like, oh, there's a PBS special or something. Okay, there's some knowledge to be taken there, but
Yeah.
knowledge is
Yeah.
truly all around us. We talked about
Right. Yes.
whether
Yes.
it's in those virtual talks, the recordings that you listen to, the podcasts, in the classroom. And so creating space to truly, and I think I do this in my teaching. It's like, I'm stepping into this class. For me, I'm here to share some information that I've learned along the way, but I'm also here to learn from you.
Mhm.
And and I'm going to come out of this experience. I like to think a transformative experience. Together, we will be a little bit better when we come out of this. This is what you've had to share with me, and vice versa. And so I think that's really at the core of it. And I reference this just because I know when we talk about indigenous knowledge, sometimes it might seem for folks who might be like, oh, but I don't have an indigeneity. I think if you I do truly believe everyone has some
Yeah.
indigenous
Right.
heritage. If you search far enough, like it's
Hmm.
going to come back somewhere. Even if, let's say, you're like, but my ancestors were Christopher Columbus and those, but they came from some
Right.
indigenous past at some point. It may not be avidly told stories nowadays, but they had to at some point. It's not as though the civilization was just like, hey, we are this, of kings and
You know
queens.
what? And
And
now that you're saying it, I wonder if that is a real source of pain that is not acknowledged. That
trauma.
my family is from Ireland, but I don't know where they are and what their names are, and the names changed. Like all of those changing of names for any immigrants,
Yeah.
right, in this country. And I think what a
I mean,
shame
it
that
is,
is, that
it is a shame. It is part of the trauma as well. But I think part of it is also like, what do you do with that information?
right,
Do you
true.
do you hold on to it and let it once more, going back to, do you continue to hold on to this imposter syndrome as you step into these spaces? Or are you just like, okay, that was in the past. How can I, what did I learn from that experience that I can carry forward?
And I will say, I don't, you can tell, I'm interested in actually what you think. I think I feel better when I am standing in my own value, even when other people are telling me you're not allowed to do that, than all the millions of times when I just kind of went prone and, kept my
Yeah.
head down and did what I was supposed to do. When inside it was like, this does not feel that
Yep. That
misalignment.
that feeling of like, I spoke my piece. I said
Right.
what was on my mind, as opposed to, no, protocol said I should have stayed quiet and not said anything. But at least you all know where I stand. You all know what's on my
And
mind.
I don't know about
And
you, but I could get like 12 compliments, which that day, there's been times that I did, but it's like all I do is think about that one person. So I think that's also a reframe of it's gonna likely have to say. Like, and they're gonna people are gonna disagree, and that's really okay. And I think for people of color, we are not taught that growing up. It is
no,
not okay to make a mistake. It is nope.
yep.
And you're gonna like shame all of us. You're gonna embarrass
Yes.
us. And I do feel that sometimes like people are just like, why I didn't like that. Now they're gonna look at all of us, but I think, well, why do you have that
Yeah.
ugly look on your face? Like people are gonna think we're like that too. Like, you know what I mean? It's just like this whole but that's a really good, yeah, I think so there's a belief that it's the disconnection that hurts us. So anytime we can remedy that disconnection,
Yeah.
and
I,
part of
I,
it is
I
forgiveness and
honestly
letting go.
though, yes, forgiveness. And I think
Yeah,
part of it's also like, well, how do we retake? How do we, so diaspora? We started
yeah,
out with this word as like, you know, this concept that it's like, oh, you're from the outside. It's negative, but there's actually great power to it as well, because you've been able to see, been in spaces and learn about things that you wouldn't have if you hadn't been part of that
exactly.
experience. And so, and in this day and age, how many folks are living that lived experience where you're like, oh yeah, I get it. I was, I understand.
Right.
So just being able, going back and then filtering in spirituality, maybe this is what the ancestors meant for you.
Right.
Because we needed people from, to have that outside lens to guide us moving forward.
And for years I tried to fit in and I just didn't. And I don't. I just so many spaces.
and
But when I could
and
embrace it,
maybe
so I
maybe that's the beauty of it. And like,
thought,
because
who
like
wouldn't have said that
I
to me
mean,
on the beach one
I
day? You're not meant to fit in. You have all these other different gifts. Like just tune in,
I
lady.
have gone back to, as I sometimes call
Yeah.
it, the motherland where I was born. And the moment I step in and speak in my first language, Spanish, they're like, "Oh, you're not from around here." And I'm like, "Yeah, I know. I don't speak the dialect from around here." And I'm okay. And,
Every
and, and I get that
immigrant I've
commentary
talked to
too.
says the exact same thing. Whether
And
you're from, anywhere, you go back to your
yeah,
home country, and then people are like scolding you for not knowing their
and
language,
and then you
your
come to the
language,
US and you get the same thing. You're not from around here. And I'm okay with that. So at
right?
some point you just become comfortable with not being the status
Exactly.
quo per se. And so, and you find your way, I guess. And so, but I can continue talking to you for hours, and maybe we'll have to do a part two to this. But I just want to thank you
No,
so
we
much
got through
for
so much.
sharing your
Thank
deep EK
you.
knowledge, your grounded presence, and the indigenous wisdom that guides your work. Your insights challenge us to rethink how we understand trauma and to reimagine peace building. Or imagine and reimagine it as well, in ways that honor both story and system, both people and place. You've reminded us that healing is not a destination, but a relationship, one where we cultivate with ourselves, with our communities, and within. We didn't get around to talking about the Aina, the land. but I think
You
it was
got it.
very,
I know ocean.
but it was very much present in our conversation that sustains us. It's truly been an honor having you today and learning from the powerful work you're doing and the intersections of trauma, healing, and restorative practice. And to our listeners, thank you for joining us in the space of learning, reflection, and connection. We hope today's conversation inspires you to approach conflict with curiosity and compassion and take an active role in creating environments of restoration, whether in your homes, workplace, or broader communities. May you carry forward the spirit of aloha and continue to build bridges of understanding in your own lives. So if you enjoyed today's episode, please share with others. Keep these conversations going. I do hope that people take certain key tidbits and bring it to their own communities because that's really part of this larger, focus to build a beautiful world, a beautiful
Thank you,
community.
Jose,
So
for letting me be me, for seeing me, for just letting me do my thing. And just so grateful to you for all these things you do on your own time. And I'm a work in progress, as we all are, but it was really fun to be able to share just from where I sit right now. So thank you.
love it, and I am truly, truly serious. We're gonna do a part two or three.
We
There's
can
so much
focus
more
on
to still
the
talk to.
ocean and we can do the ocean and the land. Yeah. All right. Take
Yes,
good care.
yes.
Okay.
Thank you so much. All the
Thank you.
best.